Well, you heard the music, you've seen the title, you've read the description, so you know it's going to be a good episode. But it's a new podcast. Yes, West Virginia Sideline Talk is here, providing football coverage for you, whether it be talking with former players or current players as well. Coaches are also included with that. But this is a great podcast for you all to learn more about probably the second best kept secret in the state of West Virginia, just because I'm biased because I play basketball. But football was always a love for me growing up. I always loved watching football, loved playing football in the backyard, wherever it may be in school. But football has always been a great love for me. And I thought, let's make another podcast. Let's do a football podcast. And our first two guests are going to be really great. I'm really excited about both of these guests. But without further ado, let's dive right into episode 1 of West Virginia Sideline Talk. And let's get into the bio. And as you guys will learn, if you guys are new to me or this podcast, you will know that I love bios. I love bios. So let's get into this bio. My guest for episode 1 played his prep football career for the Wheeling Central Maroon Knights. He played from 1989 to 1993 under coach Jim Thomas. And in those 4 years that he was at Wheeling Central, they went 37-9. So a massive, massive success with the Maroon Knights as well. He was a 4-year letterman at the University of Pitt, or Pitt University, however you want to describe it, because we all know West Virginia and Pitt don't get along with one another. So however you want to say it, okay. But he played for Pitt from 1993 to 1997. His defensive coaches were Johnny Majors and Walt Harris, so two great and iconic coaches at the University of Pitt. He was the captain of the Panthers his senior season, and he recorded 244 total tackles in his career with Pitt, which still ranks in the top 25 in program history. So his success is still known to this day, and I'm very, very happy for him to be joining us. But lastly, he just finished his 12th season on the sidelines with the West Liberty Hilltoppers, coaching the secondary and cornerbacks as well. Well, let's get right into this, and let's please, you can do jazz snaps, snap of fingers, or since it's Masters Week, hey, you can do a little golf clap if you want as well. Either way works for me. Or if you just want to get out of your seat and just start chanting hooray, either way works for me. But without further ado, let's welcome in Mr. Curtis McGhee. Coach, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, how is everything for you? Let's start right there before we dive into everything else. How's life been for you? How's football been? Walk us through that before we dive in.
No, everything's going well right now. We're in the middle of spring ball. We have our spring game next Thursday. So we just had a junior day. So right now, just in the middle of spring practice, getting after it.
We'll talk more about your coaching career, but I want to continue talking about the spring practice since it's in the new, it's still relevant right now. But when you look at spring, especially as a defensive guy, you played football at the highest level in college, and you ultimately been coaching 12 seasons with West Liberty. But when you go into each and every season, do you think that your enthusiasm level going into each spring continues to build as you continue to be in this field?
Yes, because once you get done with the season, you decompress a little bit and, you look back on what happened with the season. So you go in with a new mindset, a new attitude, and, you just try to work on what you didn't do in the fall. And, you got new guys and just work them and, see who's going to compete. And, you don't have any games. So you're just looking at who wants to be there, really.
Right. And then you also mentioned Junior Day as well. But this will be my last question before we actually dive in. But, you mentioned Junior Day. When you have a day like that, bringing prospective student athletes on your all's campus, seeing the traditions, seeing the history of West Liberty that you've been a part of for 12 seasons now, when you do that, what is it like being able to see different players that have ultimately, as the game continues to change, as your philosophy as a coach continues to change as well, what's that like for you, just continuing to bring in new and prospective students each and every year?
Well, it's good to get a look at, the different athletes around the area, different states. I mean, we had guys in from Delaware, Baltimore, New Jersey. I mean, it was big. And it's good to, to build a rapport with these guys now. And, you get to look at them through the season, they fill out cards and, and it's different now from when I played to now. I mean, with the Twitter and just different things that you have 24-hour access to them.
Right. And we'll get into that down the line. But to give the audience a little bit of context before we ultimately dive in, we'll go down a lot of different avenues. We'll talk about coaches' love for the game, where that originated from. Because I always find it fascinating to figure out where players found out where they love the game, that they've aspired to ultimately become the best player they could. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about his prep career as well, Pitt, and then ultimately getting back to this college stuff, and a couple other handicap things down the line as well, which we will take care of. But, Coach, as I mentioned, let's talk about this love for the game of football that's pretty much impacted your life for a number of years now. When you look back at the very first moment, or not even the first moment, maybe it was just a series of events for that matter, because it's different for everybody. But when you look back, where do you think this love for football originated from for you?
That's a good question. Well, as you're aware, I have two brothers. I got one that's older and one that's younger. And where we grew up, we had a whole bunch of cousins, mainly boys. So, when we were at my grandma's house, I don't know if people noticed, we used to play knee football. And my grandma lived in this house, and you would have to go over the top of like 10 boys. And I'm telling you, you would get banged up. So right then and there was when I knew I loved football, because it was physical. They didn't take it easy on you. I mean, you could be 4 years old and your oldest cousin could be 10, and they didn't take it easy on you. But my first time playing is down in Buckeye South. My brother was playing football, and they didn't have enough players. And this was tackle football way back then. And, they were looking for players because they didn't have enough. And I begged my dad, can I play? Can I play? Can I play? And then eventually he let me go out there and play. And then, like I said, it was full pads. And I love that part of it. I was 5 years old when it started. And I've played tackle my whole life. I never played flag. I never was always tackle.
Now, going back to, how you guys would always play football together, knee football, as you even said, do you think that love for it, and just being roughed up by not only your older brother, or even brothers for that matter, but also family members as well, that ultimately led to the fact that, like you just said, you never played flag football, you never played two-hand touch, it was always tackle for you? Do you think do you think that's where it all started for you?
Well, 100%. I know that's where it started at. I mean, when we weren't playing in the house, we would go out in the yard and play, and it was always physical. I mean, you weren't allowed to cry or anything. It was like you can't go in and tell if you get hit. I mean, it was like suck it up and keep playing.
Now I'll ask this. Now just off the topic, did you throw any just cheap shots just to make sure that you made sure that you were the alpha dog?
Well, I wasn't the alpha dog, but I made sure I got my hits in for sure.
Okay, I'll accept that answer. So you did not want to mess with young Curtis in the backyard.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So when you look at football at a young age for you, you mentioned how it started for you at 5 years old. Obviously, nowadays we think of Pee Wee football, we think of all these youth leagues as well with football as well, along with camps as
Mhm.
well. But when you look at your first organized game outside of when you stepped in at age 5, that you truly felt comfortable that this was a sport that you wanted to continue to play throughout Pee Wee, leading into junior high and high school. Did you sort of feel that out during youth football?
Well, I played basketball and baseball as well. So basketball was my favorite, and then baseball. Actually, football was like my third favorite because just the physicality. But I love the basketball, just running up and down the court and doing that. But
Right. So that makes sense. So
yeah,
obviously people know nowadays, at least, the rich history of Wheeling Central football. I mean, it just seems like each and every year in the Super Six, Wheeling Central always finds a way, whether they're an 8 seed, they're a 1 seed, they're a 2 seed, they always find a way. And obviously you were able to be around it often at a young age as well. Being able to see these older guys, who were a couple of guys you can sort of pinpoint right now that you saw them and you're like, okay, I want to be like him when I grow up.
well, when we were little, my dad would take us to games all around the valley. We went to games in St. Clairsville, Steubenville. We just went all around the valley, and he just would take us to games, and you sit there and watch. Like I idolized, like watching Sean Benson, a guy named from Steubenville named Tor Hill. Um, I had a cousin named Sean McGhee that played for Steubenville. I mean, we would go to those games a lot. So grew up and watching Rico Cox, and there were some good guys to be around and just watch and just love the game.
Obviously, you've played in the Northern Panhandle, you've coached in the Northern Panhandle as well, and you've been able to see football at every level as well. But when you look at the Northern Panhandle, before we ultimately dive into some of these key moments for you in high school, what do you think makes the Northern Panhandle? Um, what do you think makes Northern Panhandle football so unique and different than other parts of the state?
Well, up here, just growing up around here, that's what it is. People love football. I mean, it's from the time you're born, it's just inbred in you, like football, football, football. So I think that's what makes it so unique up here because, Friday Night Lights is like a big thing around here. So you're going and, the band's playing and all that. And you're a kid, at least when I was a kid, you would go and watch the high school games and you go over to the other field and you're out there throwing the football around and you wanted to be like, couldn't wait to get to high school and play.
Right. Yeah, I think that can apply for everybody because I know for myself, growing up, just going to because my dad went to South Charleston, my mom went to St. Albans, so we pretty much had to bounce back and forth. But regardless, it always seemed like you just said, you see the game, but then you're like, okay, I want to do that right now, and you go find like a couple
Right.
of guys, you just go start throwing the football, and you're just like, I like it. Let's continue to do this. So I
Yeah.
find that interesting. So let's get to the prep football side of things now, and looking at the first practice, because obviously you grew up playing football, you started at 5. Tackle football was always that go-to for you, nothing else. But when you got to high school football, what were those first couple of weeks like as a young freshman trying to establish himself in Wheeling Central? What was that like for you, if you can recall?
Well, see, I got to tell you, my first year, I didn't go to Wheeling Central. I went to Bridgeport High School. It's over in Ohio. Then
Mhm.
I transferred over to Wheeling Central my sophomore year. Well, at the end of my freshman year after the football season at Bridgeport. So I didn't play until my sophomore year at Wheeling Central.
So then, okay, let's talk about that transition then. So I'm glad you brought that up. So going from one high school that you learned a system, going to Wheeling Central, and then learning a completely different system. What was that transition like going from a freshman you at Bridgeport to sophomore you at Wheeling Central? What was that transition like?
Well, when I played at Bridgeport, I started as a freshman on the defensive side of the ball, and then I was a safety, and then I played a little bit of running back and receiver. But then when I transferred over to Central, my brother was already there, so it made it easy for me. So he was already established, and I just came in and just I was already there.
Do you remember the first? You obviously people remember different firsts in their prep career, but do you remember the first time that you like really hit somebody and it felt like the best thing in the world for you?
Yeah, we were doing Oklahoma's at Central, and my brother was the running back, and Matt Homan was his lineman. He ended up playing at Miami of Ohio, and I got the best of my brother. So he goes to Coach Thomas and was like, "I want to do it again." So naturally, the second time he juked me. So we're 1-1 on that.
Now I would assume that those battles between the two of you were always something that you look forward to, like especially during the Oklahoma drill. You're just like, all right, let's line up, let's go, me and you, let's go.
Yeah, for sure. It was always competitive between us two. I looked up to him. I mean, he was good, so I wanted to be like him.
What do you think the biggest piece of advice that your brother gave you at such an early age at Central? Because obviously, like you said, he was an established player. He was very good as well. But what do you think was the biggest piece of advice that he gave you early on that really stuck out to you?
It just be yourself. That was it. I mean, it wasn't like some big speech or whatever. When he left, I took over the reins, and he was like, I knew we were different types of running backs. We had different styles, but he was like, just be yourself.
So you mentioned Coach Thomas. So let's talk a little bit about Coach Thomas because I always find the interaction between a coach and a player is always important to recognize, point out as well. But when you look at that relationship that you had with Coach, and then you obviously look at coaching now, do you sort of see similarities from both sides of the football now that one you've already played it, but two you're already continuing to coach? So do you sort of see like when you see a guy do that, like do something wrong, you're just like, well, I did that wrong, so I need to approach it differently. That's what I'm trying to say. Does that go through your head?
Sometimes, you're not reinventing the wheel with football. You take what you learn from each and every coach. I mean, I've had a lot of great coaches in my time, so I try to take a little bit of, something from all of them and make it my own. But no, I don't really see any like difference or anything in it.
So let's go to a broad question. I know I've been asking a lot of questions, and I appreciate your time. But
Sure.
when you look at you mentioned it already, the Friday night lights. I always find this interesting because I think you'll get different answers from whoever you talk to. But for you being a guy that played 3 seasons at Wheeling Central for Coach Thomas, you were able to play with your brother as well. What were Friday nights like in the Wheeling Central area or Wheeling Central community, I should say? What was that like for you all?
It was, if you can understand, if you look behind that stadium that was behind you, we packed that place. There would be people lined up along the fence. I mean, both sides. Even if you didn't have a game, people came to watch us play because I ain't bragging, but we put on a show. So it was it was awesome, to look up in the stands and see the people cheering. You hear the bells ringing, people, the other team hating on you. So it was, it just filled the fire.
Right, right. So you guys, I mean, in your 3 years with Wheeling Central, you guys won 29 games. So that's a big mark that you guys accomplished
I never even knew
during
that.
your time there. So I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just something to recognize. You guys went 29-7 in those 3 years that you were with the Maroon Knight. So I could see. I mean, fun football, fun times for everybody. You look at
Yes.
the '90 season. So let's talk about that '90 season for you all. You guys had an undefeated regular season going into the state playoffs. You guys beat Grafton in the first round, and then you guys lose to Charleston in the second round. But let's talk about it in that season in its entirety. When you look at that 1990 Wheeling Central team, what made that team so dominant? Because I'm looking at these scores right now: 28-6, 19-0, 23-10, 47-8, 47-6, 32-7, 37-16. I mean, the list goes on and on. You guys only had one game in the regular season that was decided by 10 or less points, and that was this regular season finale against Lindsley, where you guys won 20-18. But when you look at that season, what made that team so successful and so dominant?
Well, I was a sophomore in that team. That was my brother's senior year. I mean, I think the year before, I think they went 10-0 and didn't even make the playoffs. So we had the next year, we came back and um, they had a lot of good senior leadership. I mean, we had guys like Matt Hoban. I think that year, 3 or 4 guys from that team went Division 1 or went and played football. I mean, it was a stacked team, and we had it all. We had defense, we had offense. I mean, we had good special teams. It was just a special team, all in all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But so then let me ask you this then. So I mentioned that loss that you all had to Charleston in the second round,
East
28 to
Bank.
10. Oh yeah, well I'm looking at it right now, but yeah, I'll take your word for it. But anyway, you guys lose that second round game, and obviously you guys had so much success. You were able to see that success at a young age as a sophomore on a team that
Mhm.
your brother was playing for, but being able to see that and then seeing that you just don't want to feel that emotion again, did that ultimately drive you to continue to perfect your craft and add different elements to your arsenal in football?
Yes, I mean, anytime you lose a tough game like that, I mean, we were right in until the end, and then I'm taking over for my brother after he leaves. I mean, he just won the Kennedy Award, so I'm stepping in the big shoes there. So I mean, I didn't feel any a little bit of pressure, but you just work and you just want to try to obtain to get to the state championship. And you got to figure at that time we played double A football, so it was a little bit tougher to get into the playoffs. I think it was what 8 teams they took. Yeah, it was 8 at the time, if I can think back. But
Hmm.
yeah, so each week was a grind.
Again, it just continues to fascinate me just in a variety of different ways for you all. But looking at it, you mentioned how your brother won the Kennedy Award. He did that in 1990. Being able to see your brother succeed, I would assume that just made a life and even the game of football for you even more enjoyable. Being able to see both you and him succeed, and ultimately, he goes on to do bigger and better things as well. I would assume that time for you was just you had to have been on cloud 9 during that time period.
Oh yeah, it was a very good time period. I mean, he was at Bowling Green, and like I said, now the all eyes are on me in the Valley. I mean, he had already solidified his prep career, so now it was time for me to make a name for myself. So I just kind of, like I said, he was a different running back than I was, and like you said, be yourself. And I was just, whenever Coach Thomas gave me the ball 300,000 times, I just ran it.
Right. No, I understand that. I do. So that's good. So let's talk. Let's shift our focus now to the recruiting side of things for you. Because again, recruiting is always really interesting to talk about because you hear a lot of different stories, how different teams came onto the scene, and all that kind of stuff. But let's talk about recruiting for you.
hmm
We'll get to Pitt here in a second, but let's talk about what recruiting was like back then for you, because obviously nowadays, you mentioned earlier in this episode that you have social media like Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it may be. There are
Right.
different ways to push your name out that way. But looking at recruiting back then for you in the early 90s, what was that like? Give us a perspective, give us some insight on how difficult it was back then compared to now. I'm just very fascinated on what your answer would be.
Well, like I said, I mean, nowadays it's right at your fingertips. Back then, I mean, if you're a coach or if they didn't come in to see you, because it was more regionalized. I mean, coaches had to fly to come recruit you, or you had to be like big time. So you may not be seen by everybody. I mean, it was more regional about, if coaches had connections at other schools, they would kind of like say, hey, I got a player, so hey, take a look at him or whatever. But it was very hard to get. You can't write notes or whatever because it was totally different. I mean, you got film, but you know, like now, I'll take for example myself. I can get 500 emails in a day. So just imagine back in the 90s, a coach getting 500 tapes of kids coming. You can't sit and watch through all that. I mean, if they did, they were crazy. I know I wouldn't, but that's just that's how much different it is. I mean, coaches coming into schools. I mean, we still go to schools or whatever, but it's local. But back then, I mean, these coaches are getting on flights. I mean, they're going all over the country. Now you don't have to do that. I mean, it's a big difference.
Do you think the focus has shifted? And what I mean by that is, do you think coaches are more likely to just do like what we're doing right now, talk on a Zoom call, compared to actually, like you said, fly out to go see, like little Jimmy or Tommy or whoever it may be? Do you think that's changed in regards to how technology continues to evolve? Do you think that ultimately will be what moves forward throughout recruiting in every sport?
Oh, 100%. I mean, then you throw in the portal. I mean, and plus with school budgets and everything, you just can't put people on a plane and go here and there. And like I said, you and I are talking. I mean, you can talk to a kid all the way in California just like this, and sit there. You can see his body type. You can see what he looks like. I mean, you can sit there and do all the recruiting right there without getting on a plane. So it makes it so much easier to recruit guys. I
Right.
mean, the technology part of it is good to where, as soon as football was over back in the day, these coaches are going, you got half your staff all over the country. Now you can have guys back and you can have guys recruit digitally, or you can have, I mean, I'm not Nick Saban, but Nick Saban can go to a kid 5 stars house and whatever. I mean, it's totally different, more
So,
accessible. I mean, everything.
so let's talk about a few of these teams that were really on to you and that you really had strong interest in. Because we know that we keep mentioning Pitt, so we'll get to Pitt here in a second again. But
Mhm.
when you look at these teams that were pursuing you hard, and you felt really comfortable when talking to a coach over the phone, interacting with them in person, walk us through who was on to you, what offers did you have, and just talk to us about that.
See, a lot of it was like letters. They would send out the letters and the questionnaires, and you would have to like send them back to like you would have to show interest in the school or whatever. I mean, they'd send you letters or whatever. And I'll get into the Pitt thing, but I was getting recruited by like the MAC schools, Georgia Tech and whatever. And with majors in them, they were at Tennessee. And this is on me because I took my ACTs late. I mean, that was big back then. You know what I mean? We had Prop 48 and whatever. So with scholarships, so when he got dismissed from Tennessee, went to Pitt, and Pitt was still on me hard or whatever. But again, I didn't take my test scores until late. So that kind of hurt me in the recruiting process with guys. And that was big back then. I mean, now you got to take your ACT, SAT, and I'd say as a sophomore, where I waited till the end of my senior year. But again, we didn't have people like pushing us and telling us that. That's just from my personal going through it and whatever. I mean, I didn't really even think about it.
Looking back at recruiting for you, do you feel like you could have done it do you think you could have done stuff differently? Meaning, pursued the school more, or, different things happen that obviously fell into place for you to go to Pitt. But do you before Pitt, do you feel like you could have done anything differently before ultimately choosing Pitt, or were you just content with just what you had?
Well, I wish I would have. Looking back, I mean, I wish I would have did a little bit more. But then again, even with football, I wanted to go to school to play basketball. I didn't really want to go to play football. I was getting little offers from small schools in basketball. I mean, I had a chance. What was the conference back then that we're in now? I can't even think of it. But I was going to go to Wheeling College and play basketball.
Oh, WVIC.
Yeah, that's it. I don't remember the name, but so I had different options. So I really didn't focus much on football. I didn't like, and here's the thing: nobody in our family, like my brother went to college, so he knew the process, but he never really like prepared me for what it was going to be like. You know what I mean? Like now these kids have all other options. Like I didn't have a guidance counselor coming in saying, "Hey, Curtis, you need to take care of your ACT or SAT if you want to go to school and all that." I mean, basically you were doing it on your own.
Right.
And looking back, I wish I would have had taken advantage of it more.
Okay. So last question about recruiting before we talk about Pitt. WVU. You're a WVU guy through and through. You're a native of here, even though you played a season in Ohio of high school football. But that's to the side. We'll give you a pass go card with that one. We'll leave that off to the side for now. But
All right.
but you played 3 seasons at Central. WVU is just it's like the holy grail for anybody that's playing in the state of West Virginia that wants to play college football, because you want to play for your home university and you want to stay in the home state. I understand that. But for
Mhm.
you, did WVU ever recruit you during high school?
No, they did not. And the funny thing is, I don't know if you know Daryl Johnson and my brother. They didn't recruit them as well either. We didn't get one letter from them, and 2 of them were Kennedy Award winners, and I got second. And I believe the statement was made that from Nealon or somebody down there. Don't quote me, that there's no players in West Virginia. But still, people still sleep on kids from West Virginia until this day, I believe. But that was the remark that was made, that there's no, we can go to Florida or whatever and get the same type of player. But like you said, when you're in your own backyard, kids will want to go play for you. That's what we grew up on. But they never recruited me. Not one letter.
How did that make you feel as a player? Because obviously we keep saying, you want to play in your own backyard, playing for the home university. But how did that make you feel?
I mean, it makes you mad, because you think you have all these numbers, you're doing everything, you're probably one of the best in the state, and your own town doesn't even look at you, and it leaves a sour taste in your mouth.
Right.
So, going to Pitt, that was like icing on the cake. So, I mean, we're going to get into it, but playing them, it was always personal, like I said in the beginning.
So let's talk about Pitt. So looking at the first time you heard from them, do you remember what that was like for you? I mean, do you remember that first interaction that you had with Pitt and their coaching staff?
The first time, actually, we played the OVAC All-Star game over there at the stadium, and I had a pretty good game in that or whatever. They were recruiting Billy West. I don't know if you ever heard of him or know of him. He was from a local kid from around here in the area. And like I said, they were sending me letters, but I didn't take my ACT or SAT yet. And they went into the coaches and was like, who was that kid that was out there playing or whatever? And they told them, they were like, oh yeah, we know who he is and whatever. And then, they offered me a preferred walk-on. So I went up there as a preferred walk-on.
So you get the preferred walk-on option with Pitt,
Mm-hmm.
and again, you're starting from the bottom. Again, you're at the bottom of the totem pole.
Yeah,
But
most definitely.
high school and college was different, obviously. But being at the bottom of the totem pole, I guess would have to have either you, because here's how it is. An athlete can approach it two different ways. They can either take it head on, or they can take the route and they're just like, okay, I'm a walk on. I'm just gonna, just sit here. You can either work hard or you can sit there. So
Right.
when you look at your time early on with Pitt, being a walk on, how did you see yourself respond and sort of almost prove to the coaches that you were worthy of a scholarship?
Great question, because I know this one, and I always tell my story is when we went to Pitt Johnstown, and guys are up there. You watch guys backpedal, you watch guys run, and I'm like, well, I can do that. I mean, in your head, you're telling yourself, I can do this. I can play. I belong here. So I think it was maybe the first, second, or third day there. I can't remember. I mean, it's so long ago. All the all the DBs, for some reason, they were older guys. They all got hurt or were faking injuries or whatever. And coach goes, McGhee, get in there. Hey, this seize the moment, right? So when I got in there, I went in there, I did well. And after that, I just started getting reps. I went from, sitting over there twiddling my thumbs to now I'm like 13 defensive back. So I'm like, all right, I'm moving up. I just got to continue to keep proving myself to these guys. And then we had a spring scrimmage, and I did very well in that. And I'd say by the time we got back to campus, I'd earned a scholarship. But I really, when could they give it? I can't remember when they gave it to me. I think I had to wait till after the first semester.
So would you consider that your it moment in regards to collegiate athletics?
Yeah, once I got on the field, I mean, I just knew I could play and I knew I belonged. So then it was just a matter of me learning, the defense and whatever. I mean, my freshman year, the light bulb didn't go on until like the ninth game of the season because I knew how to play football. But when you just play cover three and man in high school, and then you go up here and then it's a whole different ball game. Like guys going in motion, I mean, just the little things. And it was overwhelming. I'm not even going to lie, it was overwhelming. I'm like, they were speaking a different language. You know what I mean? I knew football, but I didn't know football, if it was very overwhelming.
So let's stay on that topic because that's an interesting point that you just made. College to, excuse me, prep to college is different. Obviously, we understand that.
Yes.
But you mentioned the little things that you did in high school that were completely different in college. So on the line of the little things, we mentioned the mentors early on, but let's combine the two. Looking at the mentors that you had, or even the coaches or players that you had
Mhm.
in college at an early age, how did they sort of help you understand and sort of build this idea or build this identity for college athletics, especially college football? Who sort of helped you with that?
As far as college or
Yes, college. Yes, sir.
well, my defensive back coach at the time was Tim Lewis. He played for the Green Bay Packers. He's the one that like injured his neck with Willie Gault, and he at the time he was fairly young, so I mean he had just played in the NFL. So when he came in, he was very detailed, and he like taught me the game in a way that I never had seen it before. You know what I mean? Just like watching him backpedaling, and he could still do the drills, and he would break it down to where you understood it. When you're in high school, uh, coaches just you play off your natural ability. You know what I mean? Sometimes you're not coached all the way up. If you're the guy, it's like just go out there and play. You're not really taught the little things. You go out there. Hey, go out there and watch this guy. You got him man to man the whole game, or we're just playing cover three. There it was. I mean, he taught me so much about the game that I didn't even have a clue.
Do you think your time in the film room helped you as well continue to understand these quote unquote little things?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that was the big thing. I mean, we wake up, we went to film probably 2 times a day. I mean, it was big. The film study, the preparation. Geez, it was like clockwork. You mean you would get it down to where you could just visualize it and you could just see it after a while. I mean, you just ate. That's all you did was football. So you didn't have a choice if you wanted to play and be, on the field, because they don't wait on anybody. I mean, if you can get it, you'll play. If you don't, you won't.
Right. So it sounds like you ate, you slept, and
Oh yeah.
you breathed football. So my question to you would be, was there ever a moment where you just sort of caught yourself lacking and not really you needed somebody to help you, but you had to realize it on your own that you need to take this seriously if you wanted to pursue the next level at the NFL?
Yes, 100%. I mean, you got to think about it. Every year they're trying to replace you with a new guy. And I can tell you a story. When was it? My sophomore year, I believe. We have exit meetings at the end of the year. So Coach Majors go in there. I mean, he was real blunt. He didn't pull any punches. He goes in there and he tells me, you're not the defensive back that we're looking for at the University of Pittsburgh. And I said, we had our talk, and afterwards I'm walking out of there like, damn, I'm like kind of upset. I called my dad and he's like, what are you going to do about it? I was like, point taken, you know what I mean? So I had to work harder. So that was like a tipping point to where like, I'm going to show them some more. You know what I mean? You just got to keep proving yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I understand it, 'cause it's the fire inside of that student athlete, or even the fire inside of you, that led to your success. Because as I mentioned, you still rank in the top 25 in total
Yeah.
tackles in Pitt football history with 244. My man, you must have just loved to just go after guys. I mean, you were just like a radar. You just saw him. You're just like, zoom, I'm gonna go get him. Let's go. Let's go. Line
Yeah.
up.
And that's what I said. Once you're on the football field and you're not thinking, and you can just go out there and react, and you know what's going on because you put in the time and the preparation, and you know what you're doing, you just fly around. I mean, football is it. This is going to say it's not a hard sport. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, like I tell my guys, they're not going to run the ball or pass the ball, but if you know tendencies, you get to where you're going, and you make plays. That's all.
Right.
Not a very hard game.
Yep. Absolutely. I agree with you. Um, let's get back to this WVU discussion, because I find this fascinating, because we talked off air about this, but I'm curious. WVU didn't recruit you, not one letter, not one phone call, nothing.
Nothing.
But
Nothing.
you were able to play in 4 games against the Mountaineers. Okay,
Yes.
4 games. Let me just read these numbers off to you. And it was an increase every single year. First game, 2 total tackles. Second game, 3 total tackles. Third time around, 8 total tackles, led the team in tackles that game. And then your final game as a Panther against the Mountaineers, you were second on the team in total tackles with 9 for a grand total of 22 total tackles against WVU in your years at Pitt. So, my question to you, my friend, was there just something different about playing WVU each and every time? I mean, did you feel like you had a chip on your shoulder every time that you lined up against the Mountaineers?
Yes, every time. I mean, it was just that rivalry was something. It was special to me. We got guys from Florida, everywhere else, but they didn't understand because being from Wheeling and all that, everybody's either a Notre Dame or West Virginia fan. So you hear it, you come back home, and everybody's like, "Oh, West Virginia's going to, kick your butt and this and that and whatever." So when you line up, and here's a funny story: is where would we play them at? Either my freshman year or sophomore year. So we would stay in Washington, PA, because I guess there was a story that they poisoned the team one year when Pitt stayed in West Virginia. Doesn't shock me. So we're riding in. You know how you get off at that exit, touchdown city, whatever they call it. This is you got little kids, old ladies throwing rocks at your bus, giving you the finger. You're 18, 19 years old, and you're wide-eyed, and you're looking at this. you can't explain it. I mean, an old lady, like I don't want to cuss or anything, but I think the little kids were allowed to cuss at us and give us the finger and everything when we were coming in there. I'm talking tons of people. As soon as you get off the exit, all the way to the stadium, just going crazy. I mean, so when you get out there and then you're playing, you're going through the tunnel, and people read the bios. They know I'm from West Virginia. And then when we come off on defense, they're sitting there, razzing me and stuff. So when I went out there, it was just, I want to do everything in my power to win and make their life miserable.
Well, I'll say this. You definitely made their life miserable in the last game that you guys played because it seemed like they had you guys' number those first few years. But I was going to say, November 28th, 1997 at Milan Puskar Stadium, you all lined up, beat the Mountaineers 41-38, and as you said, in triple overtime. Let's talk about this game. I mean, back and forth you all go. It just seemed like both teams were just able to click. I mean, obviously that was the Mark Bolger and Amos Zaraway years as well.
Yes.
Pete Gonzalez had a great game as well for you all. 273 in the air, 5 touchdowns. Like I said, you had 9 total tackles right behind John Jenkins as well. You actually had a TFL. I did not mention that, but you actually had a TFL. And, my friend, you had an interception as well. And it was the lone interception that Mark Bolger threw that game. So kudos to you. But anyway, when you look at that game and you all win that game in triple overtime, you guys win it off a field goal. A touchdown pass, I should say. Excuse me.
Yeah.
When you look at that game, being able to win the game in walk-off style, not so much a field goal, but a touchdown in your final game against WVU in Morgantown. You had a great game with 9 tackles, 1 TFL, 1 interception. Walk me through the emotion from not only the team, but yourself individually.
Oh, wow. That was like the cherry on the top in that game to beat them. And the biggest thing about it is we needed that game to go to a bowl game. We had never been to a bowl game. So beating them to go to a bowl game, the emotions were running sky high because it was WVU, especially for me, because we had never beaten them. And then to beat them my senior year, and I don't know if they were in a place to get anything, like, I don't know if they were in the top in the Big East. I can't remember that far back, but I just know we needed to win that game to go to a bowl game. So the excitement, I mean, we had guys jumping off that big wall over there to watch people rush onto the field. I mean, I remember sitting there with me and John Jenkins. We were sitting there, we were on our knees, sitting there praying, like, we need this. And when we scored, I think I bowled my helmet all the way across the other side of the field. I really do. I remember just taking my helmet and just chucking it all the way across the field, like, yes. And then, yes, I did go to the middle of the 50-yard line and stump on that WVU symbol.
Wow. Okay. That's the ultimate. That's a ballsy move on your part.
Oh, I didn't care then. I was super excited.
Well, again, this is a fascinating story because you didn't get recruited by WVU. You played them 4 times at Pitt. But let me go back to day one. I didn't ask this, and I should have, but it just came across my mind. Do you think that the reason why you chose Pitt is because WVU didn't recruit you and you had something to prove to that coaching staff? Because WVU, it was a few years afterwards, obviously, since the 88 national championship team. But did you feel like the reason why you chose Pitt is to show the WVU staff what they were missing out on?
I'd say that played a little part in it. I mean, and like I said, it was close. I mean, it's only an hour away from here, so
right.
I think that played a part in it as well. But then, going there, and I knew I get to play WVU every year. I did want to win that game. Unfortunately, we were 1-3, but winning the last one, people only remember the last one, so I don't remember them other 3. I just know I went out a winner.
Hey, that's one way to say it right there. But
right.
Okay. So, a couple more and about Pitt, and we'll talk about your coaching, obviously. But when you look at your time with the Panthers, obviously you all played some very, very stiff competition in the old Big East days. I mean, you're looking at teams like Miami, Florida, Syracuse, VT, WVU, teams like that people look back in the 90s and they're just like, that's Big East football. But now, obviously basketball was always physical, but football was
Right.
always fascinating during the 90s in the Big East. When you look at the time that you were able to spend with Pitt in the 90s, in the Big East, playing against some of the best competition in the country, what was that like for you?
The thing about it now is like I talk about it now because people ACC, SEC. I tell people now, like, when I played in the 90s, Big East football was the best in the country, bar none. I'll debate anybody about it because we had some of the best players. Miami was winning national championships. I mean, you had Syracuse, they were good. Virginia Tech was good. I mean, WVU was obviously good. I mean, and then our out of state schedule. I mean, we played like Ohio State, Texas. I mean, we didn't play cupcakes. We were going after people. I mean, we played Washington State one year. I know we played Ohio State. We played Texas out of conference. I mean, I can't remember all the teams, but each week it was a battle. And even though Temple and Rutgers were down in those times, you knew you were going to be in a battle. Those were probably the toughest games in there because when you played those teams, those games you came out, you felt beat up. You could play other teams and you'd be sore, but when you played Temple and Rutgers, they were just physical.
Right. No, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I'm looking at the standings for that 97 season, top to bottom: Syracuse, VT, WVU, Pitt, Miami, BC, Temple, and Rutgers as well. I mean, you mentioned how it seemed like each and every game you had to come with your A game.
Yes.
And when you look at your time in the Big East as well, what's one moment or memory that will always stick out to you? And every time somebody says the old Big East days, this memory that you're about to say always comes to mind.
About the old Big East, I would say when even though we beat WVU, we beat Miami as well that year. And like I said, they were the cream of the crop of the Big East. And when we beat them my senior year as well, and the people taking down the goalpost and taking it down Cardiac Hill, that's probably like my biggest like memory like of all time, in the Big East.
I love it. I love that because, looking at these guys, especially your senior season, a lot of great competition, especially guys that eventually went on to have good careers. We could say good careers. I
Professional
mean,
careers, Hall of Famers out of the Big East. I mean,
Donovan
tons of them.
McNabb. I mean, hello, Donovan
Marvin
McNabb.
Harrison. I can go on here and name drop all day if I wanted to, but
Matt
we'd be
Hasselbeck
here
as well.
another hour.
Oh yeah. I mean, it amazes me because obviously people think about, the SEC with Bama, LSU, Auburn, but then they look at all these other great basketball teams and even football teams for that matter. The Big East produced a good chunk of the NFL products and NFL legends that we know and love today. I mean, we just mentioned a handful. Like
Yeah.
you just said, if we were to mention all of them, that would be a podcast in of itself.
Yeah, I mean, the one year I think when the Miami team wanted, I'm just going to name some. They had like Ray Lewis. They had Warren Sapp. They had they had The Rock. The Rock was on their defensive line. Kennard Lang. I mean, they had a who's who of just NFL greats on their team. And then, like I said, you can go to Virginia Tech. You can go to WVU. I mean, with Beasley and Logan and all those guys. I mean, they had back in, they were producing guys. They got. I mean, it was on my team. I had Curtis Martin and Reuben Brown and Tom Tumulty. I mean, there were just guys everywhere.
Right. It just amazes me at how much good football you've been around throughout your whole career. I mean, to be able to play at Central and then go on to play at Pitt is just it's unreal to think about. I mean, obviously I can't really speak for you, but you could probably agree with that just because, you're a kid from Wheeling, a kid from West Virginia, like you said. Not a lot of people even think about West Virginia as a state that produces high level competition. But
Right.
But lo and behold, if you really think about it, one of the better players, arguably the best player in his position, Randy Moss, exactly, played like you all graduated the exact same year because he finished Marshall in '97 and then went to the NFL draft in '98 and he was a first round pick. So,
yeah,
like think about that. The '97 class that you were a part of produced talent. Let me rephrase: ultra talent. I mean, it was unreal.
Hall of Famers, Peyton Manning, Charles Woodson.
Exactly.
Ryan Leaf. Oh man, that class was loaded. Greg Ellis, Moss. Like I said, I mean, there was I think Dre Bly was in that class. Champ Bailey might have been in that. I mean, it was loaded.
Charles Woodson, another guy I'm looking at right now. Yeah, Charles Woodson in that class. We mentioned Moss, mentioned
Yeah,
Manning as well. I mean,
Leaf.
just Hines Ward. I mean,
Yeah,
we can't forget about Hines Ward. I mean,
yeah,
just
Hines. Yeah,
absolute dominant players anywhere they went. I mean, absolutely just dudes, straight up dudes.
right.
But okay, so one last question about Pitt.
All right.
Looking at your whole career. Obviously, you guys made a bowl game one season, and that was in '97. You guys went to the Liberty Bowl.
Yeah.
But looking at your career in general with the Panthers, 5 seasons with them, didn't play one season against WVU, which is okay.
Yeah.
But looking at your career in its totality, how would you best describe your time at Pitt?
I would describe it as successful. I mean, at the end of the day, you would like to have more wins, but the friendships and the bonds that I formed while I was there, I mean, I wouldn't trade that in for anything. So to me, I'd say it was a success. I mean, just to get out there and play and contribute, and like you said, walk away and be in top 25 till this day. I mean, I would have never thought that in a million years. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that was just part of my hard work and just the grind every day. I mean, and I tell people there were guys on that team way faster than me, way stronger than me, but I wasn't going to let them outwork me. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's shift our focus now to the coaching side of your illustrious football career. Like I said, you just finished your 12th season with the
This will be my
Hilltoppers.
12th, I think, coming up.
Oh,
I've
this will
lost
be your
count.
12th? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think
So,
so.
but anyway, regardless, you've coached numerous years at West Liberty. Let's just say it like that.
Hmm.
You've coached
Yeah,
numerous seasons at West Liberty. But when you look at so we mentioned how football and the love for that originated from. We mentioned that, you mentioned it, we've talked about it, but looking at football, what attracted you about, putting the headset on, roaming the sidelines for different teams? Where did this attraction for coaching originate from?
well, when I was done, I went and played a little bit of arena football afterwards, and then I just I just wanted to still be around the game or whatever. Actually, Walt Harris asked me to come back and be a GA, but I was like 22 at the time, and I wanted to still like pursue trying to play NFL football. I mean, that never happened, so I just got into coaching and been in probably over 20 years now.
Right.
I just wanted to still be around the game. I figured I had something to give back.
I'm looking at your bio again, and looking at these stops that you made along the way. I mean, you went back to your stomping grounds as a freshman in high school. You went to Bridgeport, Ohio, spent some seasons there. Went to Wheeling Central, Bel Air as well, and then ultimately you're now at West Liberty. When you look at, let's go back to what you said about a few minutes ago. We'll say it like that. But going back to something you had said previously, you you mentioned something I wanted to ask you, and that is looking at how you coach and your coaching philosophy. Do you take bits and pieces from all these different coaches that you surrounded yourself with throughout your incredible football career? Do you try and take bits and pieces, or do you just create your own identity, so to speak?
Well, you create your own identity, but like I said, no, you're not reinventing the wheel. So you have to have learned from somebody. So, like I said, I learned from when I was at Pitt, I had 3 different defensive back coaches. So I took a little bit of everything I learned from them and, as far as drills and techniques and just made it my own. I mean, there's so much stuff that you can get. I mean, you become your own person as a coach, but I'm not like them but I have my own style.
Right, right. So, okay, so let's get to your style. So when you look at how you coach, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume that the way you coach is the way that you played as well. Would you agree with that statement?
100%, yes. Yeah, I would say that. I mean, because I am big on the the little things of playing, and real big on technique and everything. And then most coaches are, but I would say I coach the way I play. I'm not at practice. I'm not as fiery, but when I'm at games, I turn it up a notch. It's more coaching and everything. I expect you to be able to do it on game day.
Right, right, absolutely. So, a couple more, and let's talk about some housekeeping things with West Liberty and even college football in general. Because again, college athletics continues to change at a rate that I don't think anybody would have
Can
predicted.
keep up with. Yeah.
Agreed. Yes, agreed. So let's start with the transfer portal because
Mhm.
it affects the little guys and it affects the big guys as well.
Right.
So obviously the transfer portal has become very, very popular this year. Obviously, since the NCAA said, okay, if you transfer somewhere, you don't have to sit out that year or that year that
Right.
you enter. So now it's just immediate eligibility.
Hmm.
So again, I said that it's impacted the little guys and it's impacted the big guys as well. But take us through this. How has it impacted you all at West Liberty, especially with the group in the room that you control as well?
Right now, I think last year we had 3 guys leave. One was already a graduate, and he ended up going. One was a kicker. He ended up going to Bowling Green to kick and whatever. So it really hasn't affected us yet. But as far as recruiting, when you lose guys, let's say we lose 22 guys every year. I mean, now you're looking at the portal because now you want to put guys in that can plug and play, and you don't want to develop a high school kid. Like I said, when you come out, like I take myself, when I said, when I was coming out of school, I knew how to play football, but I didn't know how to play football. Now as a coach, you want a guy that's already has played, has already been through it. And you don't, freshmen, when they come in, they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed sometimes, and it's an adjustment. But if you have a guy that's coming from another school, he's already been through the same stuff, and you don't have to spend as much time.
I agree with what you said. I agree because I think the time part of it, especially with the portal, it doesn't, like you said, you have the freshmen, you have these experienced guys, and you feel more. It's almost like you feel more comfortable. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, you do. I mean, yeah, you hope they can come in and learn a new system, but they've already been to a weight room. They've already, been to classes.
Right.
They've already got the college experience to them, to where freshmen, they come in at, it takes them a minute to adjust to college, and it's not for everybody.
So here's a question I have not asked any coach. I think this is something that this is the very first time I'm asking a question. A question like this to a coach.
Hmm.
Do you think that the art of high school recruiting is starting to die? Meaning, more and more people are focusing their time and energy on the portal, which takes away from the fact that there are college kids out there looking for that chance. Like you mentioned, they're being bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and they're looking for that chance. Do you think it's dying, but not dying is a really weird. Dying is a
I don't
hard word
say
to
I
say,
don't
but
think it's dying, but I think it's going to hurt the high school kid. I mean, he's going to have to be more up on the game. I would say, like the game of football, he's going to have to be more in tune, know how to play it. And these guys now, they got the 7-on-7s. They got a lot of these guys are coming in ready now to hit the floor running. But I don't think it's necessarily dying, but it just depends on each coach's philosophy on what they want and how they want to build their team. Me personally, I still, just like with me for defensive back this year, I would like to bring in 2 high school kids to develop, and I'd like to get 2 transfers in. I mean, because you're going to lose guys every year. So I like to bring a guy in that, that has experience. And then I'd like to just bring in a freshman and develop him and see, maybe down the line, sophomore, junior year, he can help you. I think you still need those type of guys in your system. I really do. You just can't be all transfer because they all might not work out. I mean, it's honestly, you're just rolling the dice.
right. Again, I think dying it was a weird word to use in that situation, but I
Well, I'd
think
say it's hurting. It's going to hurt it.
yeah,
I'd say for
I
the
would
next
yeah, that's how
couple
I probably would have said
couple
it.
years, I would say it's going to hurt it for the next couple years. The 22s and 23s, and especially with the COVID, we knew that was going to be big because these guys got an extra year. Now you got an overhaul on, your roster. You look like you were going to lose these kids, and then 10 kids get to stay. I mean,
Right.
then that's 10 kids you didn't get to bring in.
So along those lines, then I want to take it from a different angle, and this is
Mhm.
more the relationship side of things. You don't really hear a whole lot of these questions asked, but I want to ask this question to you because obviously you are a veteran coach at an
Mhm.
established Division II program. So my question to you, Coach, is: do you think that the relationship between a player and a coach is hurting due to the portal?
A good question. Let me think about that. Are you just because do you think guys are just coming in and you really can't develop that rapport because you think they'll leave if they don't like the situation? You ask me in that regard.
It could be from that angle. It can simply be from like what you said as well, a high school guy coming in feeling like that he knows what he's doing already, and then he realizes that he's not playing, and then he's like, okay, well, I feel like I can go play somewhere immediately, so I'm gonna go elsewhere. And that may hurt the relationship because there's like, listen, there were players throughout all of collegiate athletics that have an established relationship with a coach that they've been there for 2 3 years. And if you're there for 2 years, that feels like a long time for players.
Right.
But you do that, the coach puts all the effort and time into recruiting them, just pouring that love and support into them. But then all of a sudden the player's like, okay, I'm going to take my talents elsewhere and play for a different coach that may not have been on me like you, but I feel like I'm more welcome, the more
Right.
deserving
Yeah, I'm
here.
looking for I get what you're saying. They're looking for that chance to play now. So yeah, I guess the relationships, I mean, me as a coach, I mean, it's starting to become like a business. You know what I mean? You're almost
Yes,
treating it like a business,
I agree with that.
honestly. Especially us on the D2 level because we don't get like full scholarships and everything. So now you're just, you're divvying up the money or whatever. So now if a kid leaves, it's like, all right, bye then. You know what I mean? That sounds cruel, but they make more of them.
So then how does that affect you as a coach then? I mean, obviously, you know that you have to do things, not necessarily you have to do things differently, but you have to understand that there's this generation of college athletes just it's different than when you played, obviously. So
It's
let's say it
very
like that.
different.
So how does that affect you in how you approach student athletes, whether it be in the portal or even in high school?
Well, I'm still going to go after them and treat them the same. I mean, it's whatever. I mean, it's to each his own. I mean, if a kid feels that's not the right fit for him, I mean, even when you're recruiting them, you tell them. I mean, make sure it's the right fit. That's what I tell every kid. Even if I may want you at West Liberty, it may not be the fit here. If you think another place, because you got to be the one that's got to be there for the next 4 years. So you got to understand that's where you're going to be. And if you don't like it, yeah, you may want to transfer after 2 years and know, like, man, I made a mistake or whatever. But I mean, I still keep the same mentality to them. I mean, if they want to leave, I wish them the best.
Right. No, I agree. I understand where you're coming from because I think it is. Because what I'm trying to do with these questions is I think whenever a student athlete listens to this, hopefully they're understanding the coach side of things as much as they're listening to themselves or they're having other people in their ear. Whether that happens or not,
Right,
it's
right,
up to them. But I think by doing this, it's very instructive in allowing them to understand that there's more to the game than just
right.
X's and O's, if that makes
And let
sense.
me add one more thing. Yeah, there is more to that. So you got to understand. You got to go to class. I mean, you got to do what a coach is asking. Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. So I don't like West Liberty because I'm not getting playing time. There, as a coach, there's a reason why you're probably not getting playing time. You know what I mean? I
Right.
mean, it's earned, not given. So if you go on to the next place, it's going to be the same thing. I mean, we're all coaches. I mean, we're creatures of habit. It's no coach ain't going to tell you no different than what I'm telling you. That's what they got to understand.
Yeah. I agree. I
It's the
really
same if you
do.
bring a kid in from the portal. Just because I bring you in from the portal doesn't mean you're going to start automatically. You still got to go out here and show out and show that you can do the little things and play.
So then, okay, my final question. Again, this has been very, very informative, and I've enjoyed this. I'm enjoying this, and I appreciate your time. But my last question to you would be: we keep talking about the T word, and that's time. Time is of the essence in life, in sports, whatever it may be. But now with the portal, it seems like that clock is slowly becoming faster and faster and faster. And what I mean by that is a student can just automatically turn around and play for another team like that.
Right.
So my question to you would be, do you think time and doing the little things, as you said earlier, and how you adjusted to college as well, the time and the little things, combining those two together, do you think that is ultimately making it more difficult for coaches to try and adjust to new personnel?
Yes and no, meaning, when you do get the guys from the portal, like I said, they may work or they may not work.
Right.
Again, and when you bring in a freshman, you got to develop him. Some freshmen play right away. And the biggest thing is with the time, I mean, these guys now, they want instant gratification. You were the all-star here at your high school, but when you come in, I don't care, D2, D3, NAIA, JUCO, whatever, everybody can ball. So, guys don't want to put it in the time or the work, and then, they think it's going to be pushy somewhere else and be promised something, but that's not the case.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you with that. So with that, Coach, it's been a pleasure. It's been very, very appreciative on my part that you were able to do this with me. So I appreciate that. It's good to talk to you. It's good to hear from you as well. Good luck with everything that you guys are doing over at West Liberty. Big fan of the Hilltoppers, by the way. Love the SIDs there that helped me get into contact with you. So shout out to them. Big help to them as well. But again, thank you for your time as always. It was good. It's good learning about you as well, even more, and hearing your story. So I loved it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for having me, and good luck with your podcast. I hope it does incredible. I mean, it was nice talking to you. I had a good time as well. And good luck with your next guest, and hope you have a bright future with this.
Thank you, sir. The little things will help.
Remember that, the little things. It's always about the little things.
Absolutely. Well, without further ado, that will conclude episode 1. The very first episode of West Virginia Sideline Talks is in the books. Thank you to our special guest, Curtis McGhee, longtime coach, played at Pitt, played at Wheeling Central. We'll hold the Pitt stuff off to the side. I know. The Panther.
And I know your next guest is a WVU guy, so that makes me even feel more special that you did a Pitt guy first.
See, so the reason, okay, so let's address that. Thank you for saying that. But no, the reason why I did that was just because, obviously times are different, obviously, but at the same time, it's good to hear from guys like you, and I think it's important to recognize just about everybody. I mean, numbers are just a thing, but I'm excited, and of course, I had the rebound, is what I'm trying to say. I had the rebound. I had a Pitt guy on, so now I got to have a WVU guy on to try and get the people back on my side. So
you better bring it. You better find your Marshall guy third.
Ooh, believe me, that's working right now. PR is working on that.
All right.
Well, again, thank you all for listening to this. You can follow me on Twitter at Taylor_Kennedy7 for all the latest about this podcast and my basketball podcast as well. And with that, thank you all for listening, and stay safe.